very early on, before I went to college, I was very certain that I wanted to get into design. And I felt like I did not want to add to that crowded space that already was, kind of creating such interesting, fashion products. But what excited me was the business side of fashion, and the numbers and all of that. I now started feeling like I have so much more than I need because of just that switch that happened in my thought process. The outside world or the Western world is very good at marketing and packaging products and concepts. Our nannies and daddies have
grown up.
like Haldi, Doodh. The reason that we find this to be more expensive is because we're comparing it to something which is abnormally cheap. Every consumer has the power to vote with their wallet.
Hello and welcome to Rethink with Refash. We are excited to kick off our first episode with Akanksha Kaila Akashi, who is a fashion enthusiast turned entrepreneur and founder of Refash, the largest global platform dedicated to upcycled fashion. She has not only started a successful brand, but she is now on a mission to build a community of conscious consumers who are passionate about conversing, debating, and having conscious conversations with like-minded folks. Welcome, Akanksha.
Hi, Avantika. It's so nice to be here, and I'm really delighted to be having this conversation with you.
Likewise. So I want to know about your journey from college, being a fashion enthusiast, to starting your own brand. Like, how did that journey happen?
Yeah, well, I don't think I envisioned it to be the way it is today. But when very early on, before I went to college, I was very certain that I wanted to get into design. I wasn't sure what kind of design, but I was very set on design. Over the years, I kind of narrowed it down to fashion design. But even when I was very clear in terms of wanting to pursue fashion design, I knew that I didn't want to just be designing. I wanted to actually understand the business aspect of design as well. Which is why I did a degree in, which was basically fashion design and marketing. And through my college years, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of internships, because back in the day, I kind of thought that I wanted to get into buying and merchandising, and not the designing aspect of it, because I felt like there was a lot of talent that already existed, where people, really talented designers, were creating labels and creating so many collections. And I felt like I did not want to add to that crowded space that already was kind of creating such interesting fashion products. But what excited me was the business side of fashion, and the numbers and all of that. So I spent a lot of time doing internships and actually understanding how, what buyers really do. So I worked at the back offices or the buying offices of House of Fraser, Juicy Couture, while I was studying. Till I realized that that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do buying and merchandising. And it was basically my last internship which left a very, very big impact on me. It was an e-commerce platform back in 2012, where there were designers who could showcase and retail their collections direct to consumer. And there were global designers who were selling to global consumers. And that was a really, it was an eye-opening, experience for me, because I was experiencing a new business model. I was able to kind of see it from the inside, where that space was very, very new. On a global level as well, and in India as well. It was something which was in the very nascent stages. So back in 2012, I worked in an online platform like that. And then when I came back to India after my studies, I worked for several years within, working with other online brands. And I also had a chance to work in my family business of apparel manufacturing, where I saw firsthand how much waste is actually generated right from, the sampling stage, where there are, for example, every buyer gets you to sort of sample at least 200, 300 dresses. We were manufacturing prom dresses for the US and European markets. And every buyer would get us to sample close to 200, 300 dresses, and only maybe 20 or 30 would eventually make it to the final collections. So that number in itself was, a really huge amount of waste that is generated right even before garments are put into production, to then the entire production cycle of a garment, where the textiles that come in, sometimes the textiles get rejected because they have minor defects, or there's a color variation, etc. To the production floor, where there's so much waste that is generated while cutting the garment, and then when garments are produced, sometimes the garments also get rejected because of, again, like some defect, etc. So there's just so much waste that is generated throughout this cycle, and at that point in time I was just taking in all these experiences. I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but it was just, it's like it doesn't sit right with you that there's okay, all this is happening, you don't know what you can do about it. Obviously one person can't really change the entire industry, but it is something that you're also you're taking in, and it's adding to the experiences. And over a period of time, then we kind of decided to shut the manufacturing business. At that point in time, I also got married and moved to Bombay, and I decided to take a year off to kind of see what I wanted to do next, and with respect to fashion and design, and what really felt right at that point. And it was interestingly at that time that I ended up attending an upcycling workshop, where the designer had asked us to bring in a couple of pieces from our wardrobe which we hadn't worn in a very long time, and she helped us tweak those garments into something something interesting and something new. And an hour later I walked out with new things to wear, and I just felt like this was it was so easy to do, yet we were not talking about this enough, we weren't doing this enough. So that was the day that the idea of Refash was born in my head, and I spent the next couple of months researching and studying the market and understanding what was really happening in the space of sustainability, upcycled products in India and globally. And I realized that even back in 2018, there were so many brands that existed that were creating really cool products out of materials that were considered as waste. Whether it was wood being turned into, jewelry, or saris being turned into kaftans, but there was so much of this innovation that was already happening, and yet nobody was talking about it. So which is when I kind of decided that I wanted to create Refash as a platform that would promote as well as retail these brands that were creating new products out of waste. And the intention was also to be able to showcase that it's not just a craft project, it's not just something that somebody is making at home which is looking very crafty, because a lot of times upcycled can look quite crafty and DIY. The idea was to showcase that there are very interesting products that are literally can be compared to global products in terms of design, in terms of quality, in terms of the materials, and also longevity. So that's basically what the intention with Refash was, and that's how I think these were some of the moments that actually added to where it led me and the birth of Refash.
Wow, I mean that is a beautiful journey that you have. How has your perspective on fashion evolved since you started working in this industry and now that you have established Refash?
That's a really interesting question. So for me, I feel like when I was back in college and early 20s also, I think I was just like anybody else who was consuming fast fashion without really realizing what I was doing to myself and also what I was supporting. I think that, back in the day, I was just that regular girl who would hop into, a fast fashion brand every time I needed to go out with my friends or attend a social event without even thinking about, why I was really doing that. I think it was just out of convenience, affordability, also this entire bubble that we were living in about always being on trend and the trends changing really fast, and this kind of need to be on trend every week or every couple of weeks. I was definitely that person. I was shopping a lot. Although when I was shopping from these brands as well, from fast fashion brands, I've always been that kind of person who would shop, who would buy a product that really resonated with me or spoke to me. So while I was not buying like say 200 garments a year, I was still buying a lot more than I am today. So, and cut to, I think when I kind of decided that I wanted to start something within the space of sustainability, to me, not buying fashion for that the first year that I started Refash, because I just went on a like, you also, I think there's a mindset shift that happens when you realize that you have enough and you don't feel the need to go outward every time and buy from outside. You start looking inward and you realize that you actually have enough, and there's this door of contentment almost unlocks, where you find contentment with what you have, and also you end up styling those pieces really interestingly. So it was almost like from a space of feeling like I don't have enough, even though I was consuming so much more, I now started feeling like I have so much more than I need, because of just that switch that happened in my thought process. And that was really, it was very liberating, because suddenly I went from this feeling of scarcity to this feeling of being grateful for everything that I had in terms of, even say clothes. And also interestingly, then I was finding new ways of picking things from like my husband's wardrobe or my sister's and mom's wardrobe. Like I remember the time that COVID happened, and I was pregnant at that time with my son, and I mean, I was obviously not fitting into my older garments, and I got my nani's dupatta that she wasn't using anymore. And my nani was somebody who always was on her sewing machine, so we together like made it into a kaftan that I would wear with like a slip underneath, and that was just really comfortable for me, because I needed that space to move around, etc. And because of the fact that everything was shut down, the world was shut down. So again, like I was, making use of what was already at home, and it was a fun activity for me and my nani to do together. So yeah, I think the major thing that happened was this switch of like, from feeling like I didn't have enough to suddenly feeling like I had more than enough.
I really love that story where you made a new outfit with your grandmother's dupatta, and also doing it together with her. I mean, that creates precious memories. Absolutely. Along with a beautiful garment.
Absolutely.
So that is a beautiful story. So how do you strike that balance between promoting your brand and also asking the consumers to be more mindful, because you need to create that balance when we're talking about sustainability?
Yeah, I think this is something that over the years I have started to question myself for as well, because very organically, I created a marketplace for these brands, these upcycling brands that I actually feel very, very passionate about. And I want the world to, notice these brands because they are doing really interesting work. But I feel like I also found myself in this situation where I was almost asking customers to intuitively buy products because of the way online fashion and say digital commerce really works, where you are banking on the impulsiveness of somebody really making that purchase, and hence you're showing ads to consumers at regular intervals, etc. And that just didn't sit right with me. It just felt like at one point I am talking about I'm advocating for people to be more mindful when they're making these purchases, but at the same time, I'm also encouraging them to, buy products which they might not really need or might not even, use for a very long period of time. And then I kind of went back to my drawing board and to see, okay, how is it that I want to build this community? And that is where I actually kind of realized that this is I want to be able to foster the community community of people who want to be able to make these choices in their lives and help them grow, learn, and make better choices. So I think that that's very organically, I've kind of moved into that space of doing workshops, doing offline documentary screenings, doing swap events, and also like this podcast, for instance, where we're basically forwarding the mission of conscious consumption rather than telling people to buy products at all points in time, but also while we're fostering this community, we're also encouraging people to discover brands on Refash. And whenever they do feel that they want to buy, for example, a new jacket or a new dress for themselves, Refash is a space which is available where there are products that have been given a new life, and that's the more sort of conscious brand or product that you could buy to be able to support this larger cause of conscious consumption. That's how I've been able to kind of find that balance for myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that is really important, because as someone who was looking into buying from sustainable brands, it is sometimes difficult to find really good sustainable brands. So it is very important what you've created. I think for people like us who want to shop from responsible brands,
right,
it's important to have that platform where we can just go and find all the clothes that we want.
Yeah,
and that are
when you need to buy something.
Yeah, exactly. When we need to buy something.
Yeah.
So, as you know, India has a very rich culture, right? And we have so many beautiful handicrafts and handlooms and all these traditional clothings that we have. But right now, we have seen a trend where these are fading away. So, how do you think that we can, stop that from fading and actually preserve it?
That's a really interesting question as well. I think that, like you rightly said, that India has such a rich heritage and culture, and our history is so rich in terms of how we've lived our life. And if we would look at how our dadis and nannies lived their lives in terms of the food they consumed, or the clothes that they wore, or just the way that they would go on about their day and their journey, I think that there's so much that we can learn from that. Just the other day I was reading an article which said that the Indian cuisine is apparently the most sustainable cuisine when you compare it to global cuisines. And I thought that was really interesting. But I feel like, unfortunately, us as Indians, we're not proud of our history and our culture. We don't talk about it the way that the Westerners talk about, say, things that they would like to kind of market or package. And the other thing is, I think that the outside world, or the Western world, is very good at marketing and packaging products and concepts. So, for example, I think we all kind of were surprised by how Turmeric Latte became the new favorite beverage of everybody suddenly, when literally, like, our nannies and daddies have
grown up.
Like Haldi Doodh. Yeah, but again, till the time that it was Haldi Doodh, it was not something that we were okay to like have, and we weren't very receiving of that idea. But the minute it was packaged and promoted to us as turmeric latte in our favorite cafe, suddenly we were talking about it and we were posting Instagram stories about it. So I think that it's the way that these concepts and these products are marketed by Western cultures. But I do feel that the change is happening. There is definitely change happening, but we all collectively need to be talking about the smaller things that we are doing to support our own culture and our own heritage. For example, every Diwali, every time there's a festival, I try and wear something from my mom's or my nanny's wardrobe. Last Diwali, I wore my nanny's sari that she wore for my engagement party, which with a blouse that I had. And I spoke about it very openly on social media as well. I mean, I'm just saying that in my own way, I'm trying to be vocal about the things that I am doing in my own, sort of like regular life. But I think as all of us, if we try and promote those ideas, and that instead of saying that, okay, I went and bought something this Diwali, talk about something that you reused from your siblings or your mom's wardrobe or something. I think the more that we talk about it, the more we end up influencing people around us, our friends and family, and also then the larger kind of people who kind of are associated with us. So I think the change only happens once we are proud of our own culture and our own heritage.
I think that is something I really resonate with, because my mom, she has turned my grandmother's sarees into suits, because a lot of them, they were stained from certain places and the lace was coming out from somewhere. So she turned them into suits. So we wear them and we feel really happy that we're still connected with our grandmom in some way or the other.
This is what happened last Diwali when I wore my nani's sari. She left us a couple of years ago, and I almost felt like she was there with us, during the festivities, etc. It was like she was blessing us, just in the way of me kind of using one of her pieces or wearing her pieces. I think it's definitely it's definitely an emotion that cannot be kind of you cannot feel that emotion with pieces that you buy from elsewhere. So yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So the next question that I have for you is, despite of having so many craftsmen in India, we still don't have a multi-billion fashion brand which is of Indian origin. So why do you think is that?
That's something that is actually that came up during my studies as well. Like I was talking to you about not wanting to create another, a fashion label when I was studying fashion. But at the same time, this was something that would bother me a lot, that India is such a huge manufacturing hub, and yet we don't see a global brand that people talk about or is at that global stage. There is no Indian homegrown $1 billion fashion brand. Back in 2012, I did my dissertation on that. And there were a couple of aspects that came up. One was because, there were a lot of, at that point in time, there were a lot of family-run businesses. The people would want their family business to remain in the family, and there was a lot of hesitance in, say, hiring professional people to run parts of the organization that could be possibly run better by a professional. In terms of design, also there were sort of the designing aspect also was not at that global level at that point in time. A lot has changed since then, and we see a lot of brands, homegrown brands now in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 to 10 years that have really, made a mark for themselves and are really growing. And that's what is really encouraging, is that I think that we'll get there. We'll be able to now, in a couple of years, create that brand. An Indian, Indian homegrown brand that we'll all be truly proud of. So it is definitely happening. But yes, back in 2012, it was not something that was there. And it was something that I was very passionate about as well.
Okay, I hope we reach there really soon.
Yeah.
So there is something which happens a lot. A lot of these sustainable brands, people perceive them to be a little more expensive than the fast fashion brands.
Yeah.
So how can we really tackle this mindset of people? Like how can we change this?
I think this is something that comes up a lot when I'm, promoting upcycled fashion or sustainable fashion. We get that a lot, that, these are more expensive. And the one thing that I always tell somebody who says that this is expensive is that the reason that we find this to be more expensive is because we're comparing it to something which is abnormally cheap. We are, what we're comparing it to is a fast fashion, say a t-shirt which is cheaper than a coffee, where probably the person who's actually created that t-shirt has not been paid a fair price, was not was not working in safe conditions. So a lot of these fast fashion products are actually made in sweatshops where the artisans are not paid, the people who are working on these garments are not paid fair prices. They're working in conditions which are far from safe. Even in terms of the number of pieces that are actually made, fast fashion brands end up enjoying economies of scale because they're making products which are, go into millions, as against a sustainable fashion brand or an upcycling brand. When we talk about upcycling brands, they end up making, because of the limited resources, sometimes it's just literally that one piece or 2 to 3 pieces. So hence the price is very, very different. Like I said, we find it more expensive because of us comparing it to something which is really cheap. And that also, the cheap product is only being enjoyed by a handful of people, because the other, the merchandise which is left over, because you cannot sell a million of every t-shirt possible in that collection. A lot of it is shipped over to developing countries and burnt in incinerators. So while a small portion of the population is enjoying that cheap t-shirt for, say, I don't know, like 1 or 2, maybe 10 times, there are people who are actually paying the price for it, and also the planet is paying the price for it, because it is overproduced, and hence it needs to be tackled with in a certain way by unethical practices. So to me, I feel like that it just does not, that does not add up, because of the way that fast fashion is consumed as well as dealt with.
I agree with you, but there is another point that I would like to add to this. The fast fashion industry makes such cheap clothing items which tend to fall apart so quickly. True. That we need to keep replacing it over and over and over again. But once we buy something which is from a sustainable brand and which is a quality product, it is meant to last you for years.
Absolutely.
I mean, if we compare it with the clothing items which our grandparents used to have, one sari used to last for generations.
Absolutely.
And now we have clothings which just fall apart after a year. So that is not.
But it's also designed to fall apart.
Exactly.
Because that's the cycle we're stuck in.
Exactly. Because they want us to keep buying over and over again. So they make clothes which are very cheap quality. So that is a whole vicious cycle. And
I used to actually feel like, I don't know why we don't buy fashion the way we buy jewelry, because when we buy a piece of jewelry, whether it's like, a small piece or a larger piece, we really think so much about it, about that purchase. Are we going to wear it? How many different ways can we wear it? And also we pass it down to the next generation, and it becomes like an heirloom piece. Even the way that we used to buy shawls, for instance, like how our daddies and nannies have bought shawls, and they've been passed on to the next generation. I feel like if we look at every piece of clothing from that lens, in terms of longevity and in terms of passing it down generation after generation, I think that the way we consume will be much, much more different than the way that we have normalized right now.
Absolutely. Treating clothing as an investment rather than something we can just wear once and discard. That is actually very important for today's generation to understand. So because you are an entrepreneur and you have a brand, so what are the challenges that you faced? Because you're running a sustainable brand and people are not really aware as much as we would want them to be. So what are the challenges that you're facing right now with the sustainable business?
I think the biggest challenge is the price point, honestly. I think that people are even though we're trying to have these conversations and trying to make people aware about why the product price is what it is, change is actually something that we see in a very, very slow manner. So the price is a very, very big factor. And also in India, the fact that we're dealing with, say, secondhand materials, there's a huge stigma associated with those materials as well, where I think in India, people started kind of in the last, say, 20, 30 years, people started buying global brands and started, all these brands started coming to India, and that was something that they would want to flaunt. They would want to flaunt that they're wearing like an international brand that's come to India, or it's the newest collection, etc. Right? Because of which, and they moved away from hand-me-downs and moved away from second hands, etc. Whereas overseas, secondhand goods or even thrift stores, vintage stores are stores that people who are, say, design enthusiasts or people who are looking for unique pieces end up going to. In India, it's like if you're going to a thrift store, if you're going to a secondhand store, it would be assumed that you don't have enough money to spend on like a virgin or a new material or a new product, right? That is very slowly changing. We're not there yet, but that's definitely the biggest challenge in our space. And that's why for us, it's very important to have these conversations and to be that voice that's actually starting these conversations, because that's the only way change will happen.
So can you tell me a little more about the ethos of the community that you're building?
Yeah, that's something that's very exciting, and how I think I mentioned it earlier on in the conversation also, how this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. The idea with creating our community of conscious consumers is that it's a safe space for people to have these conversations, for people who are on maybe at different stages of their sustainable journey. There could be people who are maybe starting off, or people who are just inquisitive about how can I start off, or what does this really mean, and do I need to make like 100% switch? There's a lot of pressure when you kind of label yourself as somebody who's sustainable, or different aspects of this lifestyle, vegan, and like you would possibly would have a lot to share about as well. So I think that it's just a safe space for people to learn, grow, debate, and just be kinder to people and planet. And yeah, that's what we're trying to build as the largest community of conscious consumers.
I think it's really important to have that community or that support, because this journey can be isolating, and I have experienced that, because there was that point in my life where nobody else could relate to me in my family or my friends, and they were like, why are you doing this? I don't understand. What are you trying to do? So having that community or that space where you can talk about what you're passionate about,
absolutely,
it's actually an amazing space to have, like a safe space, where you can be yourself.
Yeah, because a lot of times I think when we take these decisions to say, lead a certain kind of life, there are a lot of people to tell us that that might not be the right path, or why, ask us questions, and we're actually finding our voice as well. We're finding why we're doing it, and what does it mean for us to be following this lifestyle. And I think while these questions on the outside are asked, it's so much more difficult to stay true to yourself. So yeah, I think it's just the idea is to have a safe space where we can all have these conversations and not feel isolated. And we hope to be able to create, meaningful change through this conversation, through this community as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So one last advice that you would like to give our viewers, how they can be more responsible when it comes to buying from responsible brands or ethical brands or sustainable brands?
I think that the only thing that as a consumer I want everyone to kind of realize is that every consumer has the power to vote with their wallet, and where they decide to spend their money really, really matters, because the minute the consumer starts asking brands the right questions, or sort of turns away from fast fashion brands to say that no, I don't agree with the practices you support, I will not spend my money here, but I would rather go to my local, like a local artisan or a local designer, and actually spend maybe maybe a little more than the money that I would spend at a fast fashion brand, but I would spend that money there because I know who's making it. I know that they're using, quality materials, and that it would last me a long time. Because in the end, I feel like if we take every decision of ours from the lens that will the people and planet be positively affected by our decision, I think that's probably the way that we should be able to make all our decisions, because I feel like if the earth is happy, then we will be happy. So yeah.
Wow. I mean, this was a very enriching conversation that we had.
Yeah.
Any other last words that you would like to
I would like
add?
to know from you, what is your relationship with fashion? How do you, where do you see yourself in this entire journey of sustainable fashion?
So I started my journey back in 2018. That was the time when I was in college, and I was feeling that eco-anxiety. Oh my God, there's so much pollution, there is so much smog, how can we fix it? And I was constantly searching what to do, how to reduce my carbon footprint. And I started, doing certain little things. And slowly I realized that we don't need to buy, from sustainable brands or sustainable products. Whatever we already have is enough.
Absolutely.
And right now, I read it in an article. Right now, we have enough clothing for the next 6 generation. Yeah. So we have that much clothing already on the planet. So we don't really need anything more.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, that totally switched my thought process. And from that point, I sort of switched from buying to using what I already have. So that is how
And it feels great, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And you become more creative.
Yeah.
Because you think, okay, how can I style this one outfit in 3 different ways?
Yeah.
So you kind of get that creative mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that that's something that it's literally like a switch that goes on, and then you can't go back to being your old self. Yeah. So yeah, but it's lovely to meet somebody who's also on that journey.
Oh, I mean, the pleasure is all mine. So I have one last interesting game for you before we leave.
Great.
So this game is called This or That.
Okay.
So I will give you a choice, and you need to choose which resonates with you more. Okay? So are you ready?
Yes.
So the first choice that you have is vintage finds or modern pieces.
I love vintage fashion. So definitely vintage.
Okay. Like the timeless fashion.
Yeah, and also those pieces are nobody else will have that interesting vintage piece, a vintage jacket, or vintage sunglasses. So I love the fact that nobody else has it.
Yeah, and also the fact that it's not that trend which will just go away. It's a timeless
It speaks to you, to your individuality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Minimalist or maximalist?
I'm definitely a minimalist. I like to have, the way that I kind of approach fashion and my everyday aesthetic as well, definitely minimalist.
Okay. Traditional or futuristic?
I think I'm a mix of both. I like to take the best. I like to look inwards and take the best of tradition and the past. But I also want to make it, something which is appropriate for the future. So I think that a mix of both. Yeah, the best of both.
Okay, I like that. Okay. Local crafts or global trends?
I think the interesting thing is a lot of times local trends or local crafts become global trends. And I think that's what I love to watch. I love to watch how, local artisans, the products and, the things that they make end up on the street, which becomes like streetwear, which is then picked up by larger trend agencies. And that ends up becoming like a global trend. So I love watching how that kind of evolves into a global trend.
I like that answer. Okay. Planning ahead or spontaneous choices?
I always plan ahead. Always.
Okay. So, creating emotional connections with garments or making purely functional clothing?
Uh, I like to have, I like it to be emotional. An emotional connect is always something that you remember. It becomes a memory. So I like to approach fashion as an emotional connect that I would like to have with my clothes. I like functional pieces also, but I think tend a little more towards the emotional connect with pieces.
So, that was it.
Lovely.
Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you. It was so much fun and I learned a lot from you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Avantika. This has been really, really fun, and I genuinely hope that we can sort of spark more conversation with the people who are watching, and this community only grows.
Thank you so much for coming, Akanksha. It was a lovely conversation that I had with you. And I think our viewers would have learned a lot. And I would love to have this conversation some other time with you as well.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to have these meaningful conversations, and I hope that this sparks more conversation amongst people who are watching this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Rethink with Refash. Remember, every small choice leads to a consequence. So let's keep rethinking, reimagining, and reshaping a more conscious world one step at a time. Subscribe and stay connected with us for more conversations that make a difference. Until next time, keep rethinking. Our venue partner for today is People of Tommorrow, a vegan cafe right here in Vasant Vihar, Delhi. They're doing some really cool things when it comes to sustainability. Whether it's zero waste cocktails, ingredient forward dishes crafted by top chefs, or even the materials they've used for their space itself. Everything here has a purpose. It's the kind of place that makes you rethink not just what you eat, but how it's made.